Well, good morning. It is Monday, March 23rd, 10 o'clock for a daily devotion. And I've been using these ones from Chuck Swindoll, pastor out in California. I think they're really good. This one is called God's Provision, and it comes from 1 Kings 17:4-6. And so we need to read that one first. So, very simply, it says, "You shall drink from the wadi," and wadi is a word for river, "and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." And so he went and he did according to the word of the Lord. He went and he lived at the Wadi Kerith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi or from the river. And that's simply all that is written this morning. And so Pastor Swindoll writes, "The ravens were God's catering service, delivering provisions to his prophet. The ravens will bring in your food, Elijah." Isn't that incredible? God makes provisions for Elijah's physical welfare during this time of seclusion, but he also provides for his spiritual welfare. God knew what Elijah needed. Therefore, the silence and the solitude were to be an essential part of this boot camp experience. In essence, God said to Elijah, "You need to get out of the spotlight. You need to come up to the mountain alone with me where you can hear my voice clearly. We need more time together, Elijah, and you need more training." The good news is this: without a moment's hesitation, Elijah obeyed, and he didn't even ask why. And it says that he went and he did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the brook Kerith, which is east of the Jordan. And I want you to notice the wording here. He went and lived by that brook. It's one thing to take a day trip off the beaten track, to go to camping for a weekend, or even to spend 2 or 3 days backpacking in the wilderness. Such adventures offer all the delights of being away from the cares of the real world for a time, even as you have the comfort of knowing that your lifeline to civilization is still there. But it's quite another to live in the wilderness, alone for an extended time. But that's exactly what Elijah did for months, possibly the better part of a year. God said, "Go there, settle there, live there." And that's exactly what Elijah did. Would you accept such an assignment from God? Would you respond with such an immediate obedience? How many of us would say nothing except, "Yes, sir, I trust you completely, and I don't need the spotlight to survive"? I think very few. We much prefer only comfort and active Christianity. Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with being a leader or fulfilling the role of a spokesman for God. How easy it is to become addicted to the public forum, feeling that you are indispensable to God's plan. How easy to neglect, ignore, and overcome those occasions when we need to pull back and to be quiet and to regroup, rethink, and renew our souls. And that's all we have this morning from Chuck Swindoll. And I don't want to talk about that last paragraph where he talks about the leaders and being in the spotlight and everything. I'm more interested in this part about, would you accept this assignment from God? Would you respond with such immediate obedience? If God called you to be a missionary in, Madagascar, would you go immediately without question if you hear that voice in your head from God? Probably not. I mean, that's pretty far-fetched and pretty out there. But we know that God calls us to do some weird and strange things for the greater good of His kingdom. But as I reflect and as I read this a few times, I think about Abram, before he was even Abraham, and Abram, when he got that call to God to go to the promised land, and God simply said, "Abram, pack up and go. Just go in that direction. Go over there." Didn't even tell him where, didn't tell him why, just said go. And so what did Abram do? He packed up his entire family, his wife Sarah, all his kids, all his belongings, his whole farm, everything that he owned, and he just went. And that faithfulness and that trust that he had in God to do all those things. I mean, I admire that. That's a hard place to be in. That's a hard place to live in. But we hear stories repeatedly of people who have done just that. And then we have stories of people like Moses who are just the opposite. God's called him at the burning bush, said, "Go get my people out of Egypt." And what does he say? "Oh, I can't speak. Send somebody else. I'm too," I don't know, he made up like 5 or 6 different excuses. He couldn't go, didn't say immediately he went, and finally he went with his brother Aaron and did just what God called him to do. I truly believe that God has called us to go. God has called us to go wherever it may be, whether it's work in the city of Grayling or volunteering in the city of Grayling or elsewhere. I truly believe that God calls us to do something in this world, and not just to sit down, as he says, and we may prefer only comfortability and active Christianity, which is basically, let's just come to church on Sunday and go to Bible study and all is good, all is cool. I think God calls us to do more, and I think God calls us to go out into this world and do great things for his kingdom. And so I invite you to hear that call. It's there somewhere, I know. I've answered it. I've heard it. I've heard God's still small voice, and I know that voice speaks to you as well. So listen for that voice. Listen for that call. Respond. May not be immediate, but there is a response just waiting there. Listen to that voice and heed God's call. Amen.